Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. The balance between safety and surveillance will be up for a vote in Ferndale soon. Technology and law enforcement have a long history. Surveillance footage used to just be on VHS tapes. Nowadays, it's live streamed. And there are plenty of local examples. Detroit's Project Greenlight has been both maligned and praised. And parking meter cameras in Royal Oak and Hamtramck have caused a stir. In Ferndale, the City Council will soon decide whether to renew a contract with public safety surveillance company Flock Safety for its automatic license plate readers. Now, this is just the latest addition to the surveillance toolbox. Flock's service takes pictures from stationary cameras mounted in public rights-of-way. It shares the data with other subscribers regionally and nationally. In Metro Detroit, 12 other cities use Flock, including Troy, Hazel Park, and Birmingham, plus Oakland County Sheriff's Department and the Michigan State Police. The city wants to renew its contract with Flock, but remove some cameras currently in service. Now, some residents and advocates oppose the contract. They cite concerns over privacy and civil liberties. In the last month, the system has detected over 500,000 cars, and it has led to arrests by law enforcement. Ferndale City Manager Colleen O'Toole told the Metro the city has seen, quote, multiple major successes in the initial pilot period. She went on to say the city has seen, quote, real-world contributions to homicide and child kidnapping investigations that were solved thanks to information gathered through the system. While the city wants to keep using Flock license plate readers, there are concerned residents who are opposing the technology. Today, I'm joined by two members of the Ferndale Inclusion Network, Prasad Venugopal and Kathleen Latosh. They're urging the City Council to vote no on the contract renewal. Prasad and Kathleen, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having us for this conversation.
Yes, thank you for having us.
So in 2023, the City Council voted 3-2 in favor of the pilot program that's coming to a close now. And your group, Ferndale Inclusion Network, has been opposed to contracting with Flock since then. Prasad, I want to turn to you first. Why do you oppose Ferndale using automatic license plate readers from Flock Safety?
Thank you for having us, and I think this is an important conversation. We were opposed to it because of what we know about the technology itself. It is mass warrantless surveillance. In fact, the statistics you were just mentioning make it clear that more than 99% of the license plates that are read are of people who are just passing through or by one of those license plates. Less than, I think it's about 0.4% in the case of Ferndale, that any of those actually show up on a hot list. And within those, we were told, even in the presentation, along with some of the cases that you mentioned, that the city mentioned, there have also been instances of mistakes being made, wrongful identification, and so on, that was touched upon by the chief. So the mass warrantless surveillance aspect of it, the highly error-prone nature of it, and the fact that there is no independent study that unequivocally states that these license plate readers actually reduce crime.
I want to dig into something you said, the highly error-prone nature of it, because, yes, this is emblematic of mass surveillance, but the reality is that we are seeing mass surveillance and others are mass surveilling us all over the country. And so I want to first think about where you see the errors happening.
So some studies that have been done, for example, one control trial that was done in Vallejo in California found that 37% of all ALPR hits from fixed readers had showed error. And more recently...
ALPR?
Automated license plate readers, as these Flock cameras are called. And other studies have found at least a 10% error rate in these hits. So Flock itself in a number of cases, has been responsible for mistaken identification. The flock cameras have been responsible for mistaken identification. Probably the most high-profile case of that is the case out of Aurora, Colorado, where Brittany Gilliam and her kids were going out for a fun day Sunday, and were stopped with cops at gunpoint and were forced to lie. These were young kids, 6, 7, 9, and 11. Subsequently, the city had to pay a $1.9 million restitution, settlement to them for what was a mistaken license plate reading, and they were wrongfully stopped. So there are high-profile mistakes, even as there are cases we would not contest where the technology has actually helped.
I know that situation was quite traumatic. I was actually a reporter in Colorado around that time, and the kids getting pulled over with the mom getting pulled out of the vehicle, all of it sounded quite horrendous for a family to have to experience. But are there any specific errors that we know of in Ferndale in the last year?
Our transparency portal does not list the errors, and the police chief did not mention that there were errors, mistaken identification, but did not actually present specific examples. That is part of the problem that we have. There is not a full conversation about exactly how these are used, exactly in what cases are they actually useful, what mistakes have been made, and what have been the consequences of those mistakes, because we don't want these lawsuits and so on against the city for wrongful identification like has happened in the Aurora case. I think we need to have these deep conversations about the actual technology itself. And the last thing I'll say is, I know that in the blurb to this program, there's this notion that we're pitting public safety against privacy and civil liberties concerns. That is actually, if we look at the community violence intervention program that has been talked about in Detroit, it is a case where public safety and privacy and civil liberties actually come together in a collaborative way. It is this technology and this particular company as a bad actor that pits those two against each other.
Prasad, are you saying that in an ideal world, surveillance wouldn't be necessary? We would be able to lean much more heavily on programs like the Community Violence Intervention Program? Or do you think there are good actors when it comes to surveillance as well who are doing this right? Because it sounds like you have a particular issue with Flock.
We do have a particular issue with Flock. It has turned out to be among the worst actors in the surveillance, license plate reader surveillance industry. It starts with a fantasy that use of license plate readers would eliminate crime, as the CEO said. But this is a company that profits off of crime. So it's hard to see the logic of a company that profits off of crime also claiming that they're going to put themselves out of business. I think Flock is a bad actor. But the idea we need to also have a deep conversation about is this mass warrantless surveillance that is part of our lives as a result of these license plate readers. I think we need to have that conversation, and the fact that it really impinges and erodes our Fourth Amendment rights.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in a little bit because that's a challenging conversation to have. There is the sense that people's rights are being violated, and then there's also folks who say, look, if one crime was solved, then this is worth it. But I want to bring Kathleen into the conversation. Kathleen, I'm wondering, what have you been hearing from community members about this?
Well, I've been hearing a couple of things. One of the things here to balance out is this valuing of human risk and human life. So sure, there are situations where the cameras have been used to identify, locate someone who has committed a violent crime and bring justice to a victim. However, the technology, and particularly through Flock, also presents significant harm risks to other humans. And most of the Flock surveillance cameras are used for detecting property crimes, not violent crimes. You'll hear that private companies want to have their parking lots surveilled for thefts, car theft in residential neighborhoods. So it's not so much about human life valuing as it is about property crime. But the risk to humans is significant with Flock. They are sharing their data with federal authorities. There are national reports that Flock data has been used to investigate immigrants. ICE has been dipping into that data to launch abortion investigations in Texas. Flock was allowing that data sharing at the same time that it told its own customers it held no federal contracts. So that's hugely problematic.
Yeah,
Um,
Kathleen, I mean, I think that would raise red flags for a lot of people, especially given the climate right now, especially as we're seeing very aggressive immigration enforcement. But there was a policy change that was outlined at the Ferndale City Council meeting, and that was that searches related to immigration enforcement or reproductive rights are prohibited system wide. Again, this seems like a policy change that would address what we're talking about right now. Is that not enough for you?
well, so what they did was they shifted a search option within the system that no longer allows officials to search using those particular terms. Interestingly, at the September 29th Ferndale City Council meeting, we were told that Ferndale had complete ownership and control over what data it shares. Um, it was it was only after City Council members asked very pointed and smart questions about the records, and it indicated that federal authorities had been looking at Ferndale's ALPR data. Only then did Flock affirm that it had happened and that it was shut down by that new Flock policy in June. This was the first time that city officials were made aware of this, and it was at the meeting in real time only when asked direct questions. And then the second part of that was that on further discussion, it was discovered again in real time at the meeting that Flock has a national lookup feature as part of its database, and it was turned on for Ferndale system, and it was still on at that meeting. The feature allows law enforcement agencies across the country to search for a specific known license plate across the cameras of all other participating police departments nationwide. And it was using it for federal immigration enforcement. It's drawn significant criticism, and that feature was turned on during the meeting, and that was the first time city officials were aware that it was in existence. So there's this sense that Flock is not operating with full transparency. There's a really good case example right now of Evanston, Illinois. Evanston, home to Northwestern University, just north of Chicago. The state of Illinois found that Flock had broken state law by allowing data collected from license plate readers to be accessed by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. This was at the end of August this year. Evanston canceled the contract with Flock because it violated state law and because residents didn't want it. Flock challenged the contract cancellation. It sued for breach of contract, but it didn't sue to recover financial losses due to breach of contract. It sued to reinstate the cameras against the wishes of the city. And before that was even determined, Flock then reinstalled its cameras without permission from city, back up on the poles. City had to issue a cease and desist order to have them remove the cameras. At this moment, we believe the cameras are still up, and the city had to put black tape over them. So this speaks to an understanding that Flock, Ferndale's not the customer for this particular company. Flock is interested in building a much larger surveillance network that is not necessarily about the best interests of our city residents or other city residents.
Kathleen, I can't speak to that specific instance, and we have reached out to Flock, and we are trying to get them on the record as well to talk about some of the things that you and Prasad are concerned about. I do want to go back to one of those items, actually, which has to do with exactly what kinds of crimes this kind of surveillance can help to solve. City officials presented the pilot program's findings last week, and in 1 year, they say 7 leads were generated, leading to 12 cases cleared. And they cited a very notable example of the technology working with a man arrested who killed his wife and child in domestic violence murders, a horrific crime. 12 cases in a year, that maybe that doesn't sound like a lot to some, but for victims, every case matters. How do you respond to people who say, if it stops even one crime, it's worth it?
Well, it's uncertain whether or not the criminal would have been found with or without the technology, because we don't have that to compare to. And secondly, Flock is not the only provider of the technology. Other cities have gone with other companies and other products that have a greater level of safety and security over the data. In Ferndale's case, it doesn't appear that other options were reviewed. And so I think there is this kind of discussion that needs to be had. And our city council members were asking really thoughtful questions at the last meeting about that balance. Like, how do we help the police department find those who do commit violent acts and bring justice to victims? That's an important question, and we don't deny that. But is Flock the answer to that is the question. And that's the thing that we're pushing back at here.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. If you're just joining us, we're talking about balancing public safety with privacy and surveillance. Ferndale City Council is expected to vote soon on whether to renew a contract for license plate reading services from Flock Safety. The software and hardware company contracts with several Metro Detroit communities and is used across the nation. Residents and advocates opposed to the contract question the security of data and if it is used equitably. The city says the technology is providing real public safety benefits, even helping solve violent crimes. I'm joined by two members of the Ferndale Inclusion Network, Prasad Venugopal and Kathleen. Kathleen, your last name has just escaped me here.
Latash.
Thank you, Latash.
And it's Venugopal.
Yeah.
And you're all urging the city council to vote no on this contract. Prasad, let's talk about the cameras themselves. The city is proposing to remove 7 cameras, saying they don't provide a good enough return on investment. Many of the cameras they plan to remove are near 8 Mile, leaving a total of 9 cameras. Do you see this as a compromise at all?
Well, actually, it's a contradiction from the police department and the city council members who were in support of it. I think the contradiction is actually the most glaring. I think it falls under the rubric of racialization of safety. Numerous times over the past 2 years, we've had the police chief, members of the community who support Flock and the police department, and one city council person talk about crime as if it's purely a Detroit-based thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that racializes the conversation itself. For example, somebody says, well, the reason there are Flock cameras on Detroit is because all the crime is committed by people in Detroit. I think these are abhorrent statements to make. They're actually on video. And I think it does not help the conversation. Is it a compromise? Actually, it's more a contradiction. For a city that said we need to place these cameras here, to stop the bad guys from coming in or to at least record them from coming in. And those are actual words that were used in a community forum. I think that we have to ask first, what study led them to put those cameras on the border with Detroit? Was it based on racial stereotypes? I mean, Detroiters have been fighting against this kind of surveillance technology for many years. We got the Detroit Justice Center, Tawana Petty, and others who deserve a shout out for the work that they've been doing to produce real public safety. We need to have a conversation about what public safety actually means for the city of Ferndale, and how can we have a conversation that partners with the cities of Detroit and Oak Park and Royal Oak Township and all our neighboring communities about that kind of public safety, and not just jump into surveillance technologies because we think it's pardon the bad pun here, a silver bullet to all our crime reduction efforts. And I will say this about this if I may, this idea that about crimes being solved, if one takes a longer view, there have been reports, one sponsored by the Department of Justice in 2011, that talked about Baltimore, Chicago, and Washington, D.C., which have been in the news recently because of the president's sending in military troops there. that said, oh, these surveillance cameras, in those cases, facial recognition cameras and so on, are helping to reduce crime. Well, that didn't last for long. The report itself is now outdated because there was a steady increase in crime, and then there's been a drop since the pandemic. What it demonstrates is that crime has always been and remains a very complex phenomenon with multiple factors. The idea that we could place or remove a few cameras from one place is automatically going to solve our problems is a fantasy. And I think it betrays a lack of the deep conversations that we need about the privacy and civil liberties concerns of ordinary Americans, all of us who live in this country. And the fact that vulnerable communities are being targeted. Over-policing of black and brown communities has been a historical reality. And the idea that we're going to put more surveillance of all kinds, Flock, for example, has been shown in numerous communities. Once it puts the cameras in, it then starts selling drones, its own version of ShotSpotter, and all kinds of other technology at tremendous cost to those communities without any real evidence that it reduces crime. So that's my response to this idea that the 8 cameras, removing these 8 cameras will automatically be a compromise that we can all get behind. I think there's a contradiction right there.
Kathleen, in the last minute that we have here, yes, please do jump in.
So Flock is also expanding the power of its system itself. It's plugging its system into national data brokers. It's also changing its still camera shots to video shots, and introducing AI analytics. And those will shift from providing tools for officials to use to investigating suspicion to generating suspicion. So tying together all those data points together to identify suspicious individuals in a community. And this kind of points to that civil liberties and mass surveillance risk that this particular company is growing nationwide, and why we are so concerned about it. But regarding the over-policing, Ferndale is 4 square miles. It's got 4 even borders. It put 10 of its 16 cameras on 8 Mile, over-policing its black and brown neighbors. We noticed that those cameras didn't get the most hits. We asked for some backup on that, but it wasn't until this past meeting that they chose to recommend taking some of those down, because most of those cameras on 8 Mile get the least number of hits. So it's really important to look at data and not kind of lean into assumptions that are really rooted in bias and are misleading.
Yeah, Kathleen, what I'm hearing from both you and Prasad is how vital it is to look at the systemic factors that lead to crime and to not lean too heavily on any one so-called solution, to instead ask what are the causes, and that can help us to get more to a solution. But a quick rapid fire question to both of you. How much of a place should surveillance have in the U.S. in solving crimes? Again, we've got just a couple seconds for each of you to answer this.
Any surveillance, even the old-fashioned surveillance done, should always be done of any kind of policing, not just surveillance, should be done as a community-centered, community-driven, peace-motivated, largely public safety concern.
Kathleen?
Agreed. With risk assessment, let's understand what the unintended and intended consequences might be of the surveillance.
Thank you. Kathleen, Latash, and Prasad Venugopal are members of the Ferndale Inclusion Network. They're urging the City Council not to renew a contract with Flock Safety for automatic license plate readers. A vote is expected in the coming weeks. Thank you both for joining me on the Metro.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's the Metro on WDET. Coming up, Michigan needs a lot more trees to fight climate change. One Detroit suburb is doing just that. We'll hear about it next on the Metro.